Picture a man. He's 50 years old, physically wrecked, and he's just suffered a fatal heart attack in a Vancouver apartment.
And, well, by his side is a 17-year-old girl, right?
Right, exactly. And behind him is this sprawling Hollywood mansion that's secretly wired with two-way mirrors and overhead trapdoors.
Which is just wild.
It really is. And, behind him are months spent embedded in the Cuban Revolution, literally writing articles alongside Fidel Castro. And soon, he'll be buried with 6 bottles of his absolute favorite whiskey.
It sounds like, the life of an absolute supervillain or something.
Doesn't it? But considering all of that dark, bizarre chaos, you might be surprised to realize you probably know this exact same man as the most wholesome, dashing, idealized, romantic hero of Hollywood's golden age.
Yeah, it's the ultimate paradox of stardom, really. We're talking about Errol Flynn, right? The iconic star of The Adventures of Robin Hood.
The one and only.
But what's fascinating here isn't just the trivia of his life, it's the mechanics of this massive, almost unbelievable chasm between a manufactured on-screen myth and a wildly chaotic reality.
Yeah.
The early Hollywood studio system operated on a really specific model. They needed an authentic, reckless adventurer to play the hero. But an authentic, reckless adventurer fundamentally cannot be domesticated by a studio contract.
Right, and that contradiction is exactly what we're going to unpack in today's deep dive into our sources.
Exactly.
The mission here is to understand the systemic machinery that built Errol Flynn's impossible pedestal, and what happens when an industry monetizes pure, destructive chaos.
Because the irony is that the very same thrill-seeking recklessness Warner Brothers sold on-screen is exactly what destroyed him off-screen.
Completely.
Yeah.
And to understand how that collision happened, you really have to look at the raw material the studio acquired in the first place. This was not some trained, polished theater kid.
Oh, far from it. He was born in Tasmania in 1909. His dad was actually a highly respected marine biology professor.
Oh, wow. So a pretty academic background then.
On paper, sure. But Flynn completely rejected anything resembling structure. His formal education ended after multiple expulsions.
Right.
The final one was actually for theft. But, and this tells you everything about him, Flynn actively chose to spread a rumor that he was expelled for a sexual encounter with the school's laundress.
Wait, he made that up?
Yeah, he wanted the world to see him as this rogue, not just a petty thief.
That is so telling.
Right. And then he spent years in Papua New Guinea doing this grueling, high-risk work, tobacco planting, gold mining, just constantly finding trouble.
So how does he even get to Hollywood?
Well, he only stumbled into acting by playing the mutineer Fletcher Christian in an Australian film, and later he joined the Northampton Repertory Company in Britain.
Okay, so a little bit of legitimate theater.
Briefly. That tenure ended abruptly when he literally threw a female stage manager down a stairwell.
I'm sorry, he threw someone down a stairwell.
Literally.
Wow. Okay, so when you look at that rap sheet, the studio's acquisition of him makes perfect sense if you view Flynn not as an actor, but as a highly volatile, high-yield financial asset.
That's exactly what it was.
Warner Brothers essentially bought a toxic asset that looked spectacular on a balance sheet.
Yeah.
And the moment he arrived in Los Angeles, the studio's PR machine just engaged its firewalls.
Oh, immediately. They did not market him as a brawling, violent Tasmanian gold miner.
Right, no. They scrubbed his reality entirely and packaged him as an Irish leading man of the London stage.
They were selling an aesthetic to the public, and they needed a clean backstory to support it.
And the studio recognized that the physical illusion was their primary product, right? And they pushed that product into the spotlight the moment an opportunity arose.
Yeah, in 1935, Warner Brothers was prepping this massive, high-budget swashbuckler called Captain Blood.
Okay.
The original star, Robert Donat, backed out because his chronic asthma made the physical demands impossible.
So they just need a quick replacement.
Exactly. The studio threw Flynn into the lead opposite a 19-year-old Olivia de Havilland, and it became a runaway hit. It basically minted him as an overnight superstar.
Which, honestly, set a really dangerous precedent. Because the studio learned they could just throw him into high-pressure situations, and his natural charisma would carry the day.
Yeah, and his legendary partnership with Olivia de Havilland, they did 8 films together. That certainly helped sell that romance.
Well, for sure. Though reading through the sources, it's clear their dynamic off-camera was much more complicated than people think.
Oh, very much so.
De Havilland actually admitted that during the filming of The Adventures of Robin Hood, she purposely blew takes of a kissing scene over and over again just to tease him.
Yeah, she knew exactly what she was doing. I mean, he was wearing those famous, incredibly tight green tights, right? And his body was reacting, let's say, naturally to the proximity. She just found it amusing to trap him in that awkward state.
That is ruthless. But, not all of his leading ladies viewed him with that kind of playful tolerance.
No, not at all. Bette Davis harbored a deep, deep resentment toward him on the set of The Private Lives of Elizabeth and Essex.
She didn't think he was a real actor, did she?
Exactly. She viewed him as a lightweight. And during a scene where she had to slap him, she struck him with brutal force.
Ouch.
Yeah. But Flynn, who was rarely without his specially trained schnauzer, Arno, ended up getting this kind of inadvertent revenge. The dog actually lunged and bit Davis on the ankle mid-scene.
You cannot script that. It's just wild. You have these incredible behind-the-scenes moments of friction, but the public only saw the swashbuckling perfection.
Right. But that physical perfection was a complete illusion, and the lengths the studio went to protect that illusion is just staggering.
Yeah, let's fast forward to World War II, because by 1942, Flynn is a naturalized American citizen.
Right.
The entire country expects the guy who plays the ultimate action hero to enlist. But he doesn't, and consequently, the press and the public turn on him. They brand him a draft dodger.
Which is a massive, career-threatening PR hit.
Huge. But the mechanics of that decision are incredible when you actually look at the medical records. Flynn didn't dodge the draft at all.
No, he spectacularly failed his military physical exam.
Because of the New Guinea years?
Exactly. Those reckless years took a severe biological toll. I mean, he suffered from recurrent malaria, a heart murmur, latent pulmonary tuberculosis, and a variety of venereal diseases.
Good grief.
Yeah. His body was quietly failing him at the absolute height of his fame.
And this is where the studio's risk management strategy is so revealing, Warner Brothers looked at that medical chart and realized they had two terrible options.
Right. They could tell the truth, admitting their athletic, virile action star was chronically ill and diseased.
Or they could let the public believe he simply chose not to fight, and they actively chose the coward narrative.
Yeah, because admitting physical frailty would permanently destroy the fantasy of the swashbuckler. They protected the physical myth at the expense of his personal patriotism.
It's just bizarre. But, maintaining that physical illusion required immense capital. Physical decay can be hidden with makeup, stunt doubles, careful lighting.
Right. But behavioral decay, on the other hand, inevitably spills into the public record.
Exactly. And in late 1942, the very thrill-seeking nature that made him a star finally breached the studio's containment efforts.
Yeah, this is where it gets really dark. Two 17-year-old girls, Betty Hansen and Peggy Satterlee, separately accused Flynn of statutory rape.
Right.
And in Satterlee's case, the incident allegedly occurred on board Flynn's private yacht, the Sirocco.
So you might be wondering how an audience in 1943, which is a highly conservative era, processes the news that their idealized romantic hero is facing deeply predatory criminal charges.
It's hard to even imagine today.
And the legal mechanics of how Flynn fought this are just brutal. He hires Jerry Geisler, this notoriously ruthless defense attorney.
Oh, Geisler. Yeah.
Geisler does not just mount a passive defense. He systematically dismantles the prosecution by weaponizing the era's legal and social standards against the teenagers themselves.
Right. Geisler's strategy relied entirely on shifting the burden of purity. He put the victims on the stand and aggressively slut-shamed them.
It's so hard to read about.
It really is. He exposed their affairs with married men, and in Satterlee's case, introduced evidence of an illegal abortion she had undergone.
Wow.
The defense basically painted a picture suggesting the girls were fully autonomous participants who were only cooperating with prosecutors to avoid legal trouble themselves.
It was a masterclass in character assassination, designed purely to make the jury view the victims as the actual instigators.
And it worked. I mean, he was acquitted. It even birthed the phrase, "in like Flynn," referencing how easily he supposedly seduced women.
A phrase people still use today, completely divorced from its dark origins.
Exactly.
But looking at the cultural reaction, it is astonishing. Instead of widespread cancellation, fans actively mobilized to protect him.
Yeah, you had groups like the American Boys Club for the defense of Errol Flynn, which, fun fact, actually included a young William F. Buckley Jr.
That is so weird, but it operates on the exact same psychological mechanism we see with modern internet fandoms, right?
Totally.
When an audience is deeply invested in an idol, they experience intense cognitive dissonance. The public was in the middle of a brutal world war. They desperately needed invincible heroes.
Right, so they collectively chose to reject the messy reality to preserve their comforting fantasy.
But, I mean, winning in court is not the same as winning back the illusion. The trial created a permanent crack in his foundation.
Oh, definitely. Audiences watching Robin Hood could no longer compartmentalize. The wholesome hero on the screen was now forever inextricably linked to the predatory headlines in the newspaper.
Yeah.
And once the studio realized the asset was damaged beyond full repair, their protective firewall began to recede. And without that containment, Flynn's descent accelerated rapidly.
The downward spiral is steep. We were talking about severe financial ruin and an inability to perform even basic professional duties.
Like on the set of Silver River.
Right. During the filming of Silver River, his drinking was so severe that he was basically incapacitated by noon.
Which is just wild for a leading man.
The director, Raoul Walsh, who had successfully collaborated with Flynn for years, was so repulsed by the lack of professionalism that he severed their relationship immediately.
Yeah, and without the studio forcing him into line, his vice just became his entire identity. His behavior lost all boundaries.
And the thrill-seeking mutated into this intense, predatory voyeurism.
Right. The mansion we mentioned at the start of our deep dive. He actually installed two-way mirrors and built an overhead trapdoor above a guest bedroom.
Just to spy on people.
Specifically to spy on his female guests secretly.
Which is an incredibly unsettling logistical effort to satisfy compulsion.
Really?
And the sources confirm this wasn't just some Hollywood rumor, right? Ronnie Wood, the guitarist for the Rolling Stones, actually toured the house in the 1970s and found the mirrors and speaker systems still intact.
Yeah, Wood explicitly described him as an A1 voyeur. It just highlights a man who no longer had any concept of consequence.
But as Hollywood backed away and his finances dried up, his ego still required that massive adrenaline high, which leads to one of the most surreal historical pivots imaginable.
Oh, it really is. It's late 1958. And aging nearly broke Errol Flynn reinvents himself as a journalist.
Journalist.
Yeah. He travels to Cuba, embeds himself directly with Fidel Castro, and begins writing dispatches for the New York Journal American.
It sounds like fiction, but structurally it was a perfectly symbiotic PR arrangement, wasn't it?
It was. Castro recognized the immense value of having a recognizable American celebrity legitimize his movement to the Western press.
Right.
And Flynn, on the other hand, well, he needed a paycheck. And he desperately needed to prove to himself and the world that he was a real-world adventurer, not just an aging actor pretending to be one.
And the timing is what makes it a genuine historical anomaly. Because of this bizarre arrangement, Errol Flynn was literally the only journalist sitting with Fidel Castro on December 31st, 1958.
The night the dictator, Fulgencio Batista, fled the country.
Yeah. He was in the room for the victory of the Cuban Revolution. It is a stunning collision of Hollywood myth-making and geopolitical reality.
But it was a temporary high. His body simply could not keep cashing the checks his lifestyle was writing.
No. The physical decay we talked about during the World War II draft physical had only accelerated over 2 decades of unrelenting substance abuse.
Yeah, by October 1959, he's in Vancouver. He's 50 years old, actively trying to lease his yacht because he is functionally broke.
And he's accompanied by Beverly Adland, his 17-year-old girlfriend.
Right. He begins experiencing agonizing back and leg pain. A local doctor assumes it's a spinal issue and administers intravenous Demerol.
And for a brief moment, Flynn feels relief. He spends a few minutes holding court, reminiscing about his wild life to the people in the apartment, refuses a drink, and goes to lie down.
And 20 minutes later, Adlon checks on him, and he is gone.
Just like that.
A massive heart attack fueled by a thoroughly failing liver.
Wow. And burying him with 6 bottles of his favorite whiskey was perhaps the most fitting and tragic acknowledgement of who he truly was.
Yeah. But the Hollywood machine's impact on his life did not end when his heart stopped. Because he had lived a life so visibly devoid of structure and boundaries, he left behind a massive vacuum.
Right.
When an individual destroys their own myth through unchecked hedonism, the public loses their baseline for reality. They become willing to believe absolutely anything about that person.
Which perfectly explains the insane posthumous narratives that sprang up. Like, in 1980, biographer Charles Hyam published a book claiming Errol Flynn was a bisexual Nazi spy.
Just unbelievable.
Claiming he used his movie locations to scout San Diego naval bases for the Japanese military.
Right. Think about the mechanics of how a lie like that takes root. It's sensationalism designed purely for profit.
Oh, absolutely.
But it gained traction simply because Flynn's actual life was already a series of unbelievable extremes.
Yeah, if you tell an audience That a man who built trapdoors in his ceiling and hung out with Fidel Castro during a revolution was also a Nazi spy. Their critical thinking just shuts down.
They just assume it tracks with his chaotic profile.
But subsequent biographers completely dismantled that claim, right?
Oh, entirely. Archival evidence proved Flynn actively tried to join the OSS, the intelligence agency that preceded the CIA.
Right.
Furthermore, during the Spanish Civil War, he publicly supported the anti-fascist Republicans.
So the Nazi spy narrative was a wholesale fabrication.
Complete fiction. But it demonstrates how history treats those who tear down their own pedestals. You lose ownership of your legacy, and the human being is entirely erased, replaced by endless, profitable speculation.
And the human cost of that legacy is profound, and it extends well beyond Errol himself. We see that tragic adventurism echo in his son, Sean Flynn.
Yeah, Sean's story is so sad.
He became a highly respected photojournalist for Time magazine, basically chasing the same kind of extreme danger his father craved.
Right, and in 1970, while covering the Vietnam War, Sean disappeared in Cambodia, presumed killed by the Khmer Rouge.
It is a devastating coda for the family. A bloodline defined by a desperate need to live on the very edge of history, ultimately consumed by it.
Yeah. Exploring these sources really reveals Errol Flynn as the ultimate cautionary tale of the studio system.
Absolutely.
He possessed severe real-world flaws, biological vulnerabilities, and deeply destructive impulses. But instead of managing the man, the industry shielded the liability.
They provided him with endless capital and legal protection to maintain a lucrative illusion.
They enabled his darkest traits until those traits metastasized and destroyed him completely.
It really forces you to rethink the nature of being discovered. I mean, imagine if that Australian film scout had never crossed paths with him.
Yeah.
If Errol Flynn had never been brought into the fiercely protective, deeply enabling bubble of 1930s Los Angeles.
Would he have lived a longer, quieter life as a tobacco planter in the jungles of New Guinea?
Or was a spectacular, self-destructive crash inevitable for a man who refused to recognize boundaries no matter what stage he was standing on?
It's a great question.
Something for you to mull over the next time you watch a Golden Era classic. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the sources. Until next time.